I had lived in New York City my whole life, but there was one place I'd only ever heard about in whispers: North Brother Island. They called it NYC's creepy Forbidden Island. From the rooftop of my apartment in the Bronx, I could sometimes see it in the distance, just a dark smudge in the East River. Overgrown trees, broken buildings, no lights, no boats, no life. Officially, it was off-limits. Trespassing meant heavy fines. Unofficially, people said it was worse than that. The island once housed Riverside Hospital, a quarantine facility for smallpox and other deadly diseases. It was also where Mary Mallon, better known as Typhoid Mary, was isolated for decades. Thousands had suffered there. Hundreds had died. And according to Reddit threads and late-night podcasts, some of them never left. I didn't believe in ghosts, but I did believe in views. As a freelance urban photographer, abandoned places were my thing. Factories in Queens, closed subway tunnels in Brooklyn, forgotten buildings in Harlem. North Brother Island would be the ultimate shot. My friend Leo warned me not to go. They don't patrol it for nothing, he said. There are stories. There are always stories, I replied. 2 nights later, just after midnight, I borrowed a small inflatable raft and pushed off from the Bronx shoreline. The river was darker than I expected, thick and silent, swallowing the sound of the city behind me. Halfway across, my phone lost signal. The island grew larger with every stroke. Twisted trees leaned toward the water like skeletal hands. Windows in the crumbling hospital reflected nothing but blackness. When my raft scraped against the rocky shore, I hesitated. The city skyline glittered behind me. Ahead of me stood silence. I stepped onto North Brother Island at 1:17 a.m. The air felt wrong. Not cold, not warm, just stale. And as I dragged the raft onto the rocks, I heard something from the tree line. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, watching me. I froze. The trees were thick, tangled with vines and decades of neglect. Moonlight barely touched the ground beneath them. The sound had come from somewhere ahead, crunching leaves, one step at a time. "Hello," I called out. My voice sounded swallowed, like the island didn't want to give it back. No answer, just silence. I turned on my flashlight and swept the beam across the tree line. Broken branches, moss-covered stones, rusted fencing half buried in dirt. Then I saw it. A path, faint but visible, pressed into the overgrowth like someone had been walking it recently. That didn't make sense. The island was closed. No residents. No visitors. No one should be here, unless someone else had the same idea as me. I followed the path toward the main hospital building. The closer I got, the heavier the air felt. The building loomed ahead, 4 stories of decaying brick and shattered windows. Ivy crawled up its sides like veins. The front entrance doors were long gone. Inside, the smell hit me first: mold, rot, and something metallic underneath. My footsteps echoed in the lobby. Old hospital beds lay overturned. Paint peeled from the walls in long, curling strips. A rusted wheelchair sat in the corner, facing the staircase. I snapped photos, adjusting exposure for the darkness. Then I heard it again. Footsteps. This time inside the building. Above me. Slow. Measured. Step. Pause. Step. I told myself it was the building settling. Old wood shifting. Wildlife moving around. But wildlife doesn't walk in rhythm. The footsteps stopped directly overhead. On the 2nd floor, right above where I stood. My flashlight flickered once, then twice. And from somewhere upstairs, I heard something that made my chest tighten. A cough. Dry. Painful. Like someone struggling to breathe. And then a whisper. Isolation. My entire body went cold. The whisper hadn't echoed. It hadn't drifted. It had come clearly from the staircase. I pointed my flashlight toward it. Nothing. Just broken railings and shadow. The cough came again. Closer this time. Wet. Ragged. I should have left. Every instinct screamed at me to run back to the raft and paddle like hell. But I didn't. Because I saw something at the base of the stairs. Fresh footprints in the dust. Bare feet. Leading upward. I hadn't noticed them before. They weren't mine. I swallowed hard and started climbing. Each step creaked under my weight. The 2nd floor hallway stretched long and narrow, doors lining both sides. Patient rooms once used for quarantine. Room 201. Room 202. Room 203. Many doors were half open. Inside, rusted bed frames sat beneath collapsed ceilings. Faded medical charts still clung to walls. Then I reached a door at the end of the hall. Closed, unlike the others. And from behind it, I heard breathing. Slow, uneven. I shouldn't have touched it, but I did. The door swung open with a long groan. The room was empty. No bed, no furniture, just peeling wallpaper and a cracked window facing the river. The breathing stopped. I stepped inside. That's when the door slammed shut behind me. The temperature dropped instantly. My flashlight went out completely. In the darkness, something moved. Not walking, dragging, across the floor, closer. And then, inches from my ear, a voice rasped. "You brought it with you." I couldn't breathe. I fumbled with my flashlight, shaking it violently until it flickered back on. The room was empty again, but the dust on the floor had changed. Long streaks dragged toward me, as if something had pulled itself across the room. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. "You brought it with you." The words echoed in my mind. Brought what? I checked my backpack. Camera, extra batteries, phone, water bottle. Nothing unusual. Then my phone buzzed. No signal, but a notification popped up anyway. Unknown sender. One message. Carrier. My stomach dropped. Typhoid Mary, the island's most infamous patient. An asymptomatic carrier of disease who unknowingly infected dozens. She had been forcibly quarantined here for over 20 years. Alone. Angry. Forgotten. The cough echoed again, right behind me. I spun around and saw her. A thin figure standing in the corner, half hidden in shadow. Long dress. Hollow eyes. Skin pale as paper. Her mouth opened wider than it should. And that cough, that awful cough, came from deep inside her chest. "You carry it," she whispered. I backed toward the window. "I don't have anything," I said. She tilted her head. "Everyone carries something." The walls began to shift. Peeling paint fell like skin. The room filled with the sound of coughing, dozens of voices overlapping. Patients, children, nurses, all infected, all trapped. The door wouldn't open. The window wouldn't budge. And the figure in the corner started moving toward me. Not walking, gliding, leaving no footprints. I screamed and lunged for the door. This time it opened. I stumbled into the hallway, gasping. The second floor wasn't empty anymore. Figures lined the corridor. Men in old hospital gowns. Women clutching their stomachs. Children with hollow eyes. All silent. All watching me. Their skin looked wrong, gray, blotched, cracked like old porcelain. And every single one of them was coughing. In sync. 1, 2, 3. Cough. I ran. Down the hallway. Down the stairs. The lobby seemed farther away than before. The building felt bigger, stretching, shifting, trapping me. As I reached the exit, I heard footsteps outside. Not ghostly ones. Heavy ones. Boots. Flashlights flashed through broken windows. Police. Stop right there. I burst out of the hospital and nearly collided with 2 officers. They grabbed me, shoving me to the ground. "You're trespassing," one shouted. I know. I gasped. "There's something in there." They exchanged a look. "Yeah," the other officer said. "There's raccoons." That's it. I looked back at the building. Every window was dark. No figures. No movement. No coughing. They escorted me to their boat. As we pulled away, I glanced back one last time. In a second-floor window, I saw her, watching and smiling. They let me off with a fine and a warning. No charges. "No one's been on that island in years," one officer told me. "Just wildlife." I didn't argue. I went home, showered for nearly an hour, tried to sleep. But that night, I woke up coughing. Dry, sharp, painful. I told myself it was stress, dust from the building, mold exposure. But the cough didn't stop. The next morning, I felt fine otherwise. No fever, no aches, just the cough. And something else. My phone buzzed again. Unknown sender. One message. "How many have you touched today?" My blood ran cold. I work in crowded coffee shops, subways, studios. I shake hands. I open doors. I press elevator buttons. I laughed nervously and deleted the message. That's when I noticed something strange. In the mirror, behind me, for a split second, I saw a reflection that wasn't mine. A pale figure standing just over my shoulder. Then gone. The cough came again. Worse this time. And in the silence that followed, I heard it. Not from outside. Not from my apartment. From inside my head. A whisper. You left the island. A pause. But the island didn't leave you. Some places aren't forbidden to protect you. They're forbidden to protect everyone else. Everyone knows about abandoned places in New York, but no one talks about Hart Island. Technically, it's just off the coast of the Bronx, a thin stretch of land floating quietly in the Long Island Sound. Officially, it's the city's public burial ground. Over 1 million bodies have been buried there since the 1800s. Unclaimed, unknown, forgotten, and it's closed to the public. That's what made it irresistible. I wasn't a thrill seeker. I was a documentary student. My thesis was about hidden spaces in major cities, places that exist but feel erased. When I pitched Hart Island to my professor, he went silent. Find something else, he said. That should have been my first warning. But 2 weeks later, just after midnight, I found myself in a small rented fishing boat, cutting across dark water toward a shoreline that didn't want visitors. The city lights behind me shimmered beautifully. The island ahead of me did not. It was darker than it should have been. No lights, no movement, just trees swaying gently in a wind I couldn't feel. When I stepped onto the shore, the air felt heavier instantly, like breathing through damp cloth. I pulled my camera from my backpack and started recording. October 14th, 12:43 a.m. Hart Island. No security visible. I moved deeper inland. Rows of simple white markers stretched across open fields. No names, just numbers. Thousands of numbers. I walked between them carefully. That's when I noticed something strange. Fresh soil. A grave that looked newly filled. But there were no footprints around it. Not mine. Not anyone's. Then my camera screen glitched. Static flashed across it for half a second. And in that flicker, I saw people standing between the graves. Dozens of them. Still. Silent. Watching me. When I lowered the camera, the field was empty. I told myself it was a camera glitch. Low light distortion. Shadows playing tricks on me. I kept walking. The graves stretched farther than I expected. Neat rows disappearing into darkness. Some areas were overgrown. Others looked recently maintained. The wind picked up suddenly. But it didn't move the trees. It moved the markers. A faint rattling sound echoed across the field, like wood tapping softly against wood. I froze. All the white grave markers were trembling slightly. In sync. Then I heard it. A whisper. Soft at first. Then louder. Numbers. They weren't words. They were numbers being recited. Over and over. 3124. 8790. 1452. Different voices. Different tones. Children. Adults. Men. Women. All speaking their assigned numbers. I stepped back slowly, heart hammering. This isn't real, I muttered. But the whispers grew louder. My camera battery dropped from 78% to 12% in seconds. The screen flickered again. And this time, when the image cleared, the markers weren't blank anymore. Names had appeared, hundreds of them, carved deeply into the wood. And at the end of the row, one fresh marker stood alone. No weathering, no moss, clean white paint. I approached it without meaning to, like something was pulling me. My flashlight beam steadied on the number carved into it. 44,721. Then the number began to change. The paint cracked, the wood shifted, and slowly, the numbers rearranged themselves. Into my date of birth. My chest tightened. Behind me, the whispers stopped. Complete silence fell over the island. And then, directly behind my ear, a voice breathed. Unclaimed. I spun around. No one. Just rows and rows of numbered graves stretching endlessly. But something had changed. The field no longer felt empty. It felt crowded. I could feel them, standing inches behind me. Even though I couldn't see them, my breath fogged in front of me. Even though it wasn't cold. I lifted the camera slowly and turned in a full circle. Through the screen, they were there. Hundreds of figures standing between the markers. Translucent. Gray. Each one staring directly at me. Their mouths moving. Whispering their numbers. Over and over. I lowered the camera again. Nothing, but I felt a hand brush against mine. Ice cold. I bolted toward the shoreline. Branches clawed at my jacket as I ran through the tree line. The island felt larger than before. Paths twisted differently. Landmarks shifted. I reached a clearing I didn't remember seeing. In the center stood a long trench in the earth. Freshly dug. Deep. Massive. Like it was waiting for dozens of coffins. Or one very large group. The ground beneath my feet felt unstable. Soft. I looked down. The soil wasn't packed dirt. It was loose. Recently disturbed. And beneath the thin layer of earth, I saw something pale. Fingers. Dozens of them. Reaching upward. Grabbing weakly at the surface. My foot sank slightly. Hands clutched at my ankle. Not violently. Desperately. Like they didn't want to be left alone again. I screamed and yanked free, stumbling backward. The trench began filling itself. Dirt sliding inward unnaturally fast. Covering the fingers. Silencing the faint, pleading whispers beneath. Then the entire island went still again. And in the distance, I heard the sound of a boat engine. But I hadn't called anyone. The boat engine grew louder. Relief flooded me. Security patrol, maybe. Coast Guard. Anyone. I ran toward the shoreline. A small wooden boat drifted toward the dock slowly. No lights. No visible motor. Just gliding across the water silently. A man stood at the back. Tall. Thin. Wearing an old-fashioned coat. His face was pale and expressionless. "You shouldn't be here," he said calmly. "I know," I gasped. "Please, I just need to leave." He nodded once. "Everyone says that." I stepped into the boat without thinking. The moment my foot touched the wood, the air shifted. The island behind me looked farther away already. The man didn't steer, didn't row. The boat moved on its own. "Who are you?" I asked. He didn't look at me. "I take the unclaimed," he replied. A chill ran down my spine. "I'm not unclaimed." He finally turned toward me. His eyes were completely black. "You will be." My phone buzzed. No signal, but a notification appeared anyway. Missing person report filed. My name. My photo. Timestamped for tomorrow. The skyline of NYC ahead looked distorted. Dim. Unreal. I turned to look back at the island. It wasn't just trees and graves anymore. It was covered in figures. Thousands of them. Standing at the shore. Watching. Waiting. The man's voice drifted softly across the water. "Some islands bury the dead." He paused. "This one keeps them." The skyline grew closer. But something was wrong. The buildings looked faded. Muted. Like an old photograph left in the sun too long. Cars on the streets didn't move. People on sidewalks stood frozen mid-step. The boat docked silently. "You're home," the ferryman said. I stepped onto the pier. The wood felt solid. Normal. But when I walked toward the street, no one reacted to me. I waved at a woman standing near a food cart. No response. I shouted. Nothing. I looked down at my hands. They were slightly translucent. Barely noticeable, but enough. I turned back toward the dock. The boat was gone. The island barely visible in the distance. My phone slipped from my fingers and hit the ground without a sound. The screen lit up. News alert. Unidentified body discovered near Long Island Sound. Authorities believe the individual may have drowned. No name listed. Just unclaimed male, mid-20s. I backed away slowly. My reflection in a storefront window stared back at me. But behind my reflection, rows of white numbered markers stretched endlessly, filling the streets, replacing buildings, replacing the city, and between them stood the figures from the island. Watching, waiting. A whisper brushed through my mind. 44721. I understood then. You don't trespass on Hart Island. You're processed, cataloged, numbered, and when no one claims you, you become part of it. Another marker in a field that never runs out of space. Some places in NYC aren't meant to be explored. They're meant to remain full. If you take the Staten Island ferry on a foggy night, there's a moment when the skyline disappears completely. No lights, no bridges, just gray water and silence. That's when you might see it. A small island that doesn't appear on tourist maps. A patch of land that feels closer than it should be. Close enough to swim to. I first noticed it during a late ferry ride home from Manhattan. I work nights, and the 1:30 a.m. trip is usually empty. A few exhausted commuters and tourists who missed the earlier boat. That night, the fog rolled in thick and sudden. People around me disappeared into white haze. Then I saw it. To the left of the ferry, an island. Trees bent unnaturally toward the water. A tall, crumbling structure rising from the center. No lights, no dock, no sign. I pulled up Google Maps. Nothing, just open water. The ferry horn blared, long and low. When I looked back up, the island was closer, much closer. So close I could see windows in the building, and silhouettes inside them. Standing still, watching the ferry pass, I turned to the couple beside me. "Do you see that?" They looked confused. "See what?" I pointed. But the island was gone. Just fog again. When we docked in Staten Island, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed us. That night, I dreamed of water filling my apartment, of something knocking from beneath the floorboards. The next evening, I boarded the ferry again, and the fog was already waiting. The second night, I stood outside on the ferry deck despite the cold. I needed to see it again. Halfway across the harbor, the engine slowed. That wasn't normal. There was no announcement, no explanation. The ferry drifted. The fog swallowed everything. Then I saw the island again, directly ahead this time, closer than before. The crumbling building was clearer now. It looked like an abandoned hospital or prison. Windows broken, walls stained dark with age, but lights flickered faintly inside. The ferry didn't crash. It stopped, dead still in the water. A metallic clang echoed from somewhere below deck. Then another, like something heavy was being unlatched. Passengers around me stood motionless, not frozen, just staring blankly ahead. A crew member walked past me slowly. His name tag was blank. "Are we stopping?" I asked. He turned his head toward me, but his body kept walking. "Yes," he said calmly. "Transfer." "Transfer to what?" But he didn't answer. Instead, a narrow gangway extended from the ferry's side, reaching toward the island. No dock, no visible support, just connecting midair to a crumbling stone staircase leading up into darkness. No one else seemed concerned. One by one, passengers began walking toward the gangway. Silent, obedient, like they'd done it before. My heart pounded. "This isn't real," I whispered, but my feet started moving too. Toward the island that didn't exist. Toward the staircase. Toward something that felt like it had been waiting. The staircase felt solid beneath my feet. Cold stone slick with moisture. No one spoke as we climbed. The building loomed overhead, larger than it had looked from the water. Rusted gates hung open, swaying slightly though there was no wind. Above the entrance, a faded sign remained. The letters were scratched away, except for one word. Intake. Inside, the air smelled like salt and decay. The hallway stretched long and narrow. Doors lined both sides, each marked with numbers instead of names. Passengers from the ferry stepped into separate rooms without hesitation. The blank name tag crew member stood at a wooden desk. "Name," he said. I didn't answer. He looked at me, eyes completely black. "You've been here before." "I haven't," I whispered. He slid a folder across the desk. Inside was my photo, taken from the ferry. Tonight. Under it, a stamped label. Returning. The lights flickered. From deeper in the hallway, I heard coughing, then sobbing, then something heavy dragging across tile. I backed away. The doors along the hallway began slamming shut one by one. Inside each room, shadows moved against frosted glass windows. One door remained open at the end of the corridor. Room 13. The number glowed faintly. A whisper floated through the hall. "You missed your stop." The ferry horn sounded in the distance. Long, mournful, and I realized something horrifying. The ferry hadn't brought us here. It had dropped us off. The hallway stretched longer as I ran. Room 13 felt farther away with every step. The floor became damp beneath my shoes. Water pooled around my ankles. The building was flooding, but no one else reacted. Passengers walked calmly into rooms, closing doors behind them. As the water rose, I heard voices beneath it, whispers bubbling upward, thousands of them. The door to room 13 creaked wider. Inside was no room at all, just open ocean, dark, endless. The ferry floated there, anchored in nothingness. Empty, waiting. The blank name tag crew member appeared behind me. "You can board again," he said softly. "Or stay." "Stay where?" I shouted. He He gestured around us. The hallway was gone. We stood knee-deep in black water. And beneath the surface, I saw faces. Pressing upward, eyes open, mouths moving silently. Passengers who hadn't made it back. "Every crossing takes someone," he said. "Balance." The ferry horn echoed again. Closer now. The crew member's face began to change. Skin peeling away like wet paper, revealing something hollow beneath. "You were chosen last time," he whispered. "But you ran." Hands grabbed at my legs from below. Cold. Desperate. I lunged toward the ferry. The deck felt real beneath my hands. Solid. Safe. I pulled myself up, and the island vanished. I woke up on a bench inside the Staten Island ferry terminal. Security stood over me. "You okay?" one asked. "You passed out." Fog lingered outside the glass windows. The skyline looked normal. Alive. I laughed nervously. "Did we stop?" I asked. The guard frowned. "Ferry doesn't stop mid-route." I checked my phone. No missed time. No strange photos. No folder labeled returning. I told myself it had been exhaustion, stress, imagination. Until the next week, when the fog rolled in again. I told myself I wouldn't look. I wouldn't go outside. But when the ferry slowed slightly, just slightly, my body moved on its own, toward the deck, toward the water. And there it was, the island, closer than ever, the building's windows glowing softly. And on the shoreline, figures stood waiting. One of them looked exactly like me, waterlogged, pale, eyes open, watching the ferry approach. The horn sounded, long, mournful, and over the speaker, a calm voice announced, "Next stop." No one else reacted. No one else seemed to hear it. But I knew, the island doesn't appear to everyone, just the ones it's ready to take. And sooner or later, everyone takes the ferry at night.